I still remember this like it happened yesterday, even though it's been years. I was 14 and my family just moved to this house in the suburbs of New Jersey. Our backyard was huge, with nothing behind it except this wide open field. No trees, no fences, just grass and weeds as far as you could see. We'd only been living there for a couple of months. It was around 10 p.m., maybe a little later. My parents were already in bed and I was just hanging out in the living room, watching TV, procrastinating on taking out the trash like I usually did. The trash can was right next to the sliding glass door that led to the backyard, so I finally got up, grabbed the bag, and slid the door open to toss it in the bin outside. As soon as I stepped out, though, something caught my eye. There were two figures moving across the field, heading straight toward the house. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was dark and the only light was from the porch behind me, but even in the dim light, I could make out their shapes. They were black like silhouettes and they moved in this weird, unsettling way. I remember squinting, trying to figure out what I was looking at. I thought maybe they were animals, but nothing about them looked right. They were too slim, and they weren't walking like any four-legged animal I'd ever seen. The closest thing I could compare them to would be kangaroos, but that made no sense. I mean, I was in New Jersey. There are no kangaroos here. Plus, the way they moved was wrong, like they were loping on all fours. Their limbs swinging is strange too. I just stood there, watching them come closer. They didn't seem to notice me at first, or if they did, they didn't care. They were just moving steadily toward the house. I couldn't make out any details, but the way their bodies were shaped, it was almost like they were built for moving low to the ground. I took a step back into the house, still holding the trash bag, and my foot hit the edge of the door. The sound must have alerted them because that's when they stood up. I swear, in one smooth motion, they both went from moving on all fours to standing upright on two legs. That's when the panic really hit me. These things, whatever they were, weren't animals. Animals don't just stand up like that. They were tall, taller than I expected, and their movements got even weirder, faster. It was almost like they'd been pretending to walk like animals until they realized I was watching them. I flicked on the porch light, thinking maybe it would scare them off or at least give me a better look. But as soon as the light hit them, they ran. They didn't run normal, too. It was strange, bounding motion, like they were springing forward with each step, covering way more ground than they should have been able to. I only caught a glimpse of them running before I slammed the door shut. I didn't look long enough to see where they went. I locked the door, pulled the curtains tight, and just stood there, trying to make sense of what the hell just happened. My mind was racing. What were they? I wanted to believe they were just some kind of weird local wildlife, but nothing about them fit any animal I knew. And there had never been anything remotely large in our neighborhood before. I know what I saw. I saw two creatures that night, and they weren't normal. I haven't seen anything like them since, thank God. And to this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't turned on the light. I was just laying on my couch, scrolling through my phone. It was like 1 a.m., and I couldn't sleep. You know when you get that weird second wind where you're tired but wide awake at the same time? Anyway, I'm sitting there in the dark, minding my business, when I heard a noise coming from my backyard. I thought it was just the wind, because it's been super windy lately, but this sound was different. It was like a growl, like something was really pissed off. Now, I don't live in the middle of nowhere, but my house backs up to some open fields, so we get coyotes sometimes. I thought that's what it was, until I looked out the window. There, standing by my fence, was something I couldn't immediately recognize. It wasn't a coyote. Hell, it didn't even look like a dog or anything I'd seen before. It was a small, wiry thing, and covered in these sparse patches of hair. Its back was arched, almost like a cat when stretching, but its arms and legs were fucked up, bent at odd angles. The weirdest part? Its head. It was shaped like a possum's, but its face was flat, almost human-like, with huge, bulging eyes that reflected the light from my house. And it wasn't walking on all fours. It was crouched low, moving in a fucked up way, almost like it didn't know how to use its legs right. I'm standing there, staring, trying to make sense of it, and this thing, whatever it was, suddenly stops and looks at me, like it locked eyes with me through the window. I can't even describe how unsettling that was. I panicked and ducked down behind my couch. I waited there for like a minute or two, and when I finally worked up the nerve to peek out the window again, it was gone. Just gone. The next morning, I checked around my yard. No tracks, no signs of anything unusual. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell it was, but the way it looked at me, I can't get that out of my head. I'm from Indiana, and my parents own a small farm just outside of town you've probably never heard of. Cornfields, soybeans, the usual Midwest setup. Anyway, this happened a few years ago, and I haven't really told many people about it because, honestly, it sounds too crazy to believe. I was home for the summer after my first year of college. My dad asked me to help him fix the busted irrigation system in the field. So we were out there just after sundown, working under the headlights of the truck. The sun had already dipped behind the trees and the sky going dark. As we were finishing up, I noticed something moving in the corn. Now, it's not unusual to hear rustling in the fields, could be a raccoon, deer, whatever, but this was different. It was too big to be a raccoon and too quiet to be a deer. My dad shrugged it off, saying it was probably nothing, but I wasn't convinced. I mean, you spend enough time around these fields and you start to recognize what's normal and what isn't. I kept working then. Out of nowhere, the rustling got louder, and this awful smell hit us. It was like wet dog mixed with rotten meat. Just this overpowering stench that made me sick. My dad even paused and looked up like, "What the hell is that?" Before either of us could react, we saw it. This thing stepped out from between the rows of corn, maybe 50 feet away. It was on two legs, but it wasn't human. It was tall but hunched and has like a dark fur. Its arms were way too long, almost dragging the ground. I remember its eyes being the worst part, almost like a cat's in the dark, but bigger. And they just locked onto us. Me and my dad didn't move a muscle. Then my dad grabbed my arm and whispered, "Get in the truck, now." We slowly backed up, trying not to turn our backs on it. The whole time, this thing just stood there, watching us. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, it just watched. The second we got in the truck, my dad floored it. I looked back, and I swear, I saw it take a step toward us, before it disappeared into the corn. Probably something caught its attention. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the night. I know what I saw, and I've never felt that kind of primal fear before. Like this wasn't just some animal, this was something else. I still avoid going out into the fields at night, even now. I was hiking with my friend Rob in the Smoky Mountains. We've done this trail a ton of times, except this time it was different. About halfway up the mountain, things got weird. The woods felt off, the kind of off where the birds stop chirping. You don't even hear the wind. Rob's a jokester, so when I pointed it out, he started going on about how the hills have eyes. But even he seemed off. Anyway, we kept going because, what else are we gonna do? We're about 3 miles into the trail when we hit the clearing at the top of the hill. Usually it's our snack spot with an insane view, but this time the feeling was way different. There, standing at the edge of the tree line. It wasn't like any animal I've ever seen before. It was tall, like taller than Rob, and he's over 6 feet. But its limbs were all wrong, too thin, almost like they were stretched out. I thought it was a bear at first, or maybe a weird-looking deer, but no. This thing was on 2 legs, and it just stood there, staring at us. Rob froze, I froze. No one said anything. We just stared back, trying to process what the hell we were looking at. I remember thinking, is this some kind of sick prank? But there's no way. The way it moved, too, was messed up. It didn't run or charge at us, it just started walking slow steps towards us. That's when Rob lost it. He whispered, "Back up slowly, we don't want to startle it." Rob's the guy who laughs at haunted houses, makes fun of horror movies. Nothing phases him. But this had him spooked. We started backing up slowly, not taking our eyes off the thing, but the closer it got, the more I could see just how wrong it was. Its skin was pale, like it hadn't seen the sun in years. And its eyes were solid black. No whites, no pupils, just darkness. I didn't need Rob to tell me twice. We turned and bolted back down the trail, not looking back. I could hear something behind us, not super close, but enough to make me want to sprint faster than I ever have in my life. By the time we got back to the car, we were drenched in sweat, barely able to breathe, but whatever it was didn't follow us down.